Hey folks, welcome back. I'm Dave and we're here in my shop where I build E-War guitars. This is going to be episode number 8 of my entry into the GGBO 2022 scratch build competition. And we are still working on the neck. So if you watched last week, we got the neck all cut out on the CNC machine. We got our truss rod routed in, tuners drilled and all that kind of stuff. Now it's time to move on to this fretboard. And this is going to be my fretboard. I've already started working on this a little bit. I've got a 1/4 inch thick piece of wenge here on top, and I've laminated to the back of it 3 laminations. I have a maple, bloodwood, and maple, which is going to match the theme of the rest of the guitar too. And I think it'll look pretty cool once that's down there and all sanded in. You'll see those stripes underneath the fretboard. And the other deal with putting those 3 pieces on there too, it actually is going to raise this fretboard up off of the neck enough that it's going to match up with my bridge down here. So anyway, I've been trying to figure out what to do with my fret markers to do something kind of cool, so it's just not your typical little mother of pearl inlays or anything like that. So this is what I've come up with. I've been tinkering around all morning, and I took this is a piece of MDF that I've done some mock-up stuff in, and I don't know if you could see it, but I've come up with this little kind of a curved diamond shape, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something called a V-carve inlay. Of course, I'm using my CNC machine to do it, and what you do is you cut first the pocket, and this is going to be cut with a 30-degree angled V-bit. I'm going to cut the pocket with the V-bit, and so the pocket's going to go down, and it's going to actually taper like so. And then, so once those are all cut into the piece of wenge, I'm going to get this piece of bloodwood right here, or actually I've got one sitting on the machine already. I'm going to get this piece of bloodwood, and I'm going to cut these diamonds in it that's going to have the opposite taper. So the pocket tapered like this, and these guys are tapering like so. So when you flip it over like this, that guy is going to fit right in there, leaving just a little bit of a gap so I can get my bandsaw in there and saw them off. And when it's all said and done, I should have really cool looking bloodwood diamond shaped inlays on the top of my wenge fretboard. And I think it's going to look pretty cool. And this is a trial and error thing like always, and that is why I made up 2 of these fretboard blanks to just in case one goes wrong, I've got a backup here. I can keep rolling with this guitar. Anyway, I'm set up over on the machine over there to, I'm going to start by cutting out the little diamonds into the piece of bloodwood. And I'm going to turn that camera around and get it down there, and we're going to start going on that right now. So what I'm doing here at the first pass, this is what they call the clearance path. In other words, I've got a 1/4 inch upcut spiral bit, and it's just taking out the bulk of the material. And once the bulk is taken out everywhere, then I'll switch over and I'll use my V-bit, and that'll do the final cut, which is going to cut the V shape onto these diamonds, which will allow them to fit really nicely into the pocket. I'm still working on these tool paths to get the right speeds and all that going. I had a little bit of fraying because these get to a tiny little point at the end. So once I was satisfied with that, I decided to go ahead and cut out the pockets into the fretboard. And of course, first it's doing the clearance tool path first, which is 1/8 inch bit. Then I just come around with the same V-bit as I used to make the diamonds and to cut out the remainder. You're worth it all. And so while the fretboard was down on the CNC machine, I put the 1/4 inch bit back on, and I did the profile pass around the outside edge to cut it out, leaving 4 tabs on there to keep it attached to the outside waist piece. Okay, so I think that is coming out pretty good so far. I've got all of my fret marker slots cut in there, the holes cut in there that tapered down. It came out that wenge really milled up nice. I mean, it's really clean, clean edges and everything. It looks really good. Also went ahead and cut out the profile too. I'm going to keep it stuck on this thing for the time being, but I did cut out the profile except for those 4 tabs in there that's going to keep it attached to the edges, because when I do my fret slots, I'm going to do it my old-fashioned way, which is on my table saw, and I've got that sled because I have tried with the CNC machine And that tiny little bit right there, you can't see the tip because it's broke off. And I got 3 others just like it in the drawer over there. I haven't quite got it figured out with the feeds and speeds yet and everything for cutting the fret slots. So I'm going to, once I get these guys glued in there, I'm going to take it over to my table saw and cut the fret slots like usual. I just have to be really careful to line it up properly because I've already got my length cut. The nut, this nut goes up here. I've already got the length cut, and I'll have all my inlays in, so I just got to be really careful of how I line it up on the table saw, and I should be okay. Anyway, so I've got, I've also, while I was doing that, I also went ahead and cut these little guys out. These are the little inlay pieces. Of course, they have the opposite taper of the fretboard. And so what I should be able to do, I'm going to mix up some of my brown glue, and they should drop right in there like so. And I'm going to get them all laying in place. I'm going to lay another piece of MDF on top and clamp it down. And when this sets up, I should be able to run it through my bandsaw, cut that off, sand it off on the top, and hopefully I have some really cool looking inlays. All right, so I think that looks really good. I'm real pleased with that. There was a couple little points here at the very end that when I cut out the bloodwood out of the, when I cut the diamonds out of the bloodwood, it kind of frayed on the ends where it got really thin. And I can see a little bit of glue there. There's 2 or 3 spots. I may when I'm all done, dig that out and then get a little bloodwood sawdust and a little CA glue and put it in there. But I think overall, I think it came out really cool looking. So I think I want to do something else. I think I want to take it another step. I've got this other piece of wenge right here, and I am thinking about cutting a smaller diamond in the middle of this and then plugging it with the wenge to kind of make this just the bloodwood being just a border, like the shape in the border around the outside edge, about a 1/16 of an inch wide. And then I think on the 12th fret, I've got a piece of maple, and I'll cut a small diamond of maple in the center of the 12th fret marker here too. I think that'll look pretty cool.
Strength in all my weakness, you're the healer of my...
So while the CNC machine was working away over there, I decided to take this opportunity to go ahead and do the final fitment of my truss rod. Now I had the whole thing, the majority of it cut out, but I still had to go back with my chisels and clean up some of the rounded corners and stuff like that and just make sure I had a really good fit. I honestly probably had it a little bit too tight with the CNC machine, and next time I'll open that slot up just a little bit. It fits fine, but it's just a little snug.
Forever here around me, yeah. Fear won't overwhelm your love, and I know you're the king who has called me by name from now till forever.
Okay, so I think that came out pretty well. I've got the inner diamonds cut in there. For some reason, the inner diamond is a little closer to the top of the red diamond than the bottom, but it's awfully close. And I think it's going to look cool besides. So, and it's funny, the CNC machine was working fine all the way it got to this last one, and just before it finished it just stopped. And I have no idea. I guess that's electromagnetic interference or something. Thank God it didn't do anything crazy and cut up anything, but it did stop. So I just had to finish that guy off a little bit. I just cleaned it up with an X-Acto knife and a chisel. And I think it's going to work out good. And at the same time, I've gotten my little guys, that's my 12th fret right there. That's going to be a maple inlay. And then all the rest of them are going to be wenge. And these guys, I've got to work on the tool paths a little bit. They're tiny little pieces and they kind of got frayed a little bit on the edges. I don't know if that's, I think it goes deep enough into the pocket that it's going to, most of that's going to disappear. But we'll just have to see. That's something, as I'm learning, I'm just going to have to figure that kind of stuff out. But anyway, I believe I'm ready to go ahead and glue these things in. Oh, and while that was going, no, I didn't film that because I was busy watching that CNC and working at this at the same time. I went ahead and put some gold epoxy. I mixed up some gold epoxy and I got it in my eWar logo up top here. And hopefully that's going to look cool. I'm going to do gold hardware on this. That's why I thought a gold inlay would look good up there too. So anyway, I'm going to put this aside for now and get to gluing these markers up on this fretboard.
I will sing your praises, declare them in the valley, shout them on the mountain top. Jesus, I will sing your praises forevermore. Ooh, forevermore. My fight in every battle, my shield and my defense. You won the final victory, yeah, and placed me in your rest. And I know you're the King who has called me by name.
All right, so that came out, I think, really cool looking. I love it. I love it. I think it's subtle, but I think it's cool looking too at the same time. And that grain pattern I used in the wenge that's in the little inserts in there is a very similar grain to what's on this fingerboard, so it almost looks like it lines up. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with that. Now, if you notice, and I guess something must have been off a little bit, but that inset diamond is a little bit high on each one of those frets, but they're all exactly the same, so it's almost like I planned it that way, you know? Anyway, I'm real happy with it. I'm thrilled to death, and I think it's time to get slotting on this thing. So it's time to go over the table saw and get my jig set up and get slotting away.
Take me home, and I know you're the King who has called me by name. From now to forever, when you take me home, Jesus, I will sing your praises, declare them in the valley, shout them on the mountain top.
Okay, so I was a little nervous about this because I was mixing two different machines to do basically one very critical operation, being that I cut the length of this thing on the CNC machine, which means I cut the nut end of this thing, which is important in reference to all the rest of the frets. I was a little nervous about doing it two different machines or two different methods, but I can see going by my template I have here, this is one I keep in the shop, I am lined up dead on each of these fret slots from this other 25-inch scale length deal I got here, so I'm good. I'm happy with that. I think it turned out very nice. Okay, so I've got everything ready to go. This fretboard, I had it cut out on the CNC machine. I had it set to cut it a little bit wide. It's maybe, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch too wide overall, something like that. And I've used my nut blank that I'm going to make the nut out of to set the distance off of the break angle on the headstock. So I'm going to have that lined up right there. And I'm just going to center it because this thing is cut out centered with the fret markers. I'm going to center it by feel on both ends. Stick a little clamp here in the middle. That looks good. I'm centered. So I'm going to use this fret side dot marking material right here, which is 3/32 of an inch round. And when you do that, you've probably seen this before, I'm going to drill it right into a fret slot here and up here. And the fret, so I'll drill that in, I'll drive it all the way down into the neck itself, and that's going to keep this thing aligned when I go to glue it. And the fret, when it's all said and done, will cover whatever you're going to see in that rod.
In you, I'm standing tall, yeah. And now I know that there's no dark to fear. I'll praise forevermore. And Jesus, I will sing your praises, declare that in the valley, or shouting from the mountaintop. Jesus, I will sing your praises forevermore. Ooh, forevermore. Ooh, forevermore.
Okay, so this thing sat up overnight. It's that glue is well cured, and it is time to move on to the next step. First thing I got to do is I'm going to have to trim down these edges because, like I said, I had the CNC cut this fretboard out just a little bit too wide. It was the exact right length, just a little bit wide. So I'm going to first run that through my table router over there and trim those edges down. And then we're going to set up on my jig for radiusing the fretboard. So I suppose some of you are wondering, why would I use a jig when I've got that CNC machine sitting over there? Well, you know, that CNC machine definitely can do the radiusing of the fretboard. In fact, the mock-up I made of this guitar, I did radius the fretboard on the CNC machine. But as those of you that have watched this whole series knows, and my last series too, I'm very new to CNC machines. And I'm still a little bit nervous about, every once in a while that CNC machine will kind of get off track and do something weird. And I haven't figured out exactly what's causing it yet. It only happens once in a while. But I would really hate to have so much work in this neck and all of a sudden have some errant little jog on that CNC machine and it digs through this fretboard or something and ruins a whole lot of work for me. So in an effort to keep this guitar moving along without any huge problems, I'm going to go back and use a jig that I made a few years ago. I've used it many times and it works great. And hopefully in the future, as I progress on with the CNC machine and I learn more about it and I figure out what happens there every once in a blue moon, I will be radiusing my fretboards on the CNC machine. But for now, I'm going to use my jig. So let me turn that camera down and show you all what we got going here. Okay, so this jig has two components basically. It's got this guy right here, which is basically a sled. I'll clamp this down to my bench, and I've got these two aluminum rails here on top, and I've got these bolts here on the side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this neck in here, okay, and I'm going to shim it so it's perfectly level. It's very close now. I just checked. It's within a couple thousandths, but I'm going to shim it a little bit so the top of this fretboard is perfectly parallel with the top of these, or perfectly parallel with these two rails right here. And then I'm going to use these bolts that I've got coming in on the sides. I've got little brass inserts in there that the bolts thread into. And I'm going to lock those in on the sides of the neck and make sure I have it centered up in here perfectly, okay? So once that's done, the other part of this jig is this radiusing base I made for my router. That's just a couple of pieces of red wood, and I made this little jig. I've got it attached to the router with a clear plexiglass base plate. And I've got a couple of pieces of Formica on here too, high impact plastic, which is very smooth and it rides really nicely on those rails. Well, that guy is cut at a 12-inch radius, and what will happen is this router will sit up here. I'll drop that bit all the way down till it's touching the center of the top of that fretboard, and I'll basically run this guy back and forth like so, turn it a little bit and run it again. And the bottom of that router bit, that's just a 2-flute straight cutting bit. The bottom of that router bit will cut a nice, beautiful 12-inch radius across this entire fretboard and leave me with nothing more than a little bit of hand sanding to do to finish it up. But anyway, let me get this guy set up in here and all set to go, and then we're going to run the router over it and have our fretboard radiused.
God, I messed up again. I didn't pay preacher's 10. I gave it to someone in need. Does that mean you won't bless me? God, I'm trying hard not to curse in my car, even when the traffic's bad. Did you ever get really mad? I'm on my way to church, gonna sing songs even if it hurts. But honestly, I feel you more when I leave. I can't figure out quite why all of the smoke and the lights don't bring me closer to this real world's walking and talking to you. God, I missed this time. I slept until 9. Instead I got down on my knees. I just tried to hear you breathe. God, I'm a little scared to see what goes on in there.
Okay, so we've got the fretboard completely slotted, radiused, and then I sanded it with 220 grit, went over it several times, checked with my straight edge, make sure it was still staying perfectly flat. I then took my fretting saw and I sawed the slots to make sure I had full depth and to get anything out of there. You know, when you radius these things off, you lose a little depth on the edge, so I kind of run the fret saw through there a couple times just to clean that up. Then I took my little triangular file and I also cut back the edges of the top of these fret slots, which makes it a whole lot easier to put in frets. And then I also rounded off the edges a little bit. I took a little 80 grit and then some 150 grit. And I just kind of knocked down these corners a little bit to make it a little bit softer for the player in the end. So I'm going to get ready to do these frets, because while this thing is still its full thickness and I've got a flat bottom on it, I like pressing my frets in because it just works better on my fret press having it like that. So, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and put a very light coat of boiled linseed oil on the top of this thing, because I'm going to use medium CA glue down in these fret slots. And if any gets on the surface here, I feel like that boiled linseed oil kind of helps, gives me an extra second to get it cleaned off. So I'm going to do that right now and let that dry while I'm setting up to do my frets.
This real world's walking and talking to you.
All right, folks, we're going to have to leave it about there for now. As you can see, I went ahead and fretted the guitar too. In fact, I've still got all my fret tools out in front of me, but the video was just getting way too long, so I had to cut it off there. Anyway, I think it's really turning out cool. I am really happy with the way those little fret markers came out, and I'm pretty happy with my little eWar logo too. The gold, the shininess of the gold kind of went away when I sanded it down and carved it down flush, but I'm thinking that's going to come back once I start sanding with the high grit papers and I put some clear on there. So anyway, this was a lot of fun. There's a lot of tricky stuff in that CNC for a beginner like me, but I think it came out looking pretty cool and I enjoyed the heck out of doing it. And I hope somebody got a little something out of this video. So anyway, if y'all come on back next week, I'm going to be carving on this neck and getting ready to glue these wings on it, so don't just keep clamping it on. I like clamping the wings on the guitar when I get on the neck when I get something like this done, so I can kind of see how it's progressing. Anyway, I'm just digging doing this, and I love making the videos and everything, and I hope somebody got a little something out of it. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and God bless you, and we'll see you all in the next one.